This conference will now be recorded.
There you go. Thank you very much. Uh, we sent around an agenda earlier. Do any members have any amendments to it that they'd like to make? Luce, yes,
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
I can.
Yes. Did you have on here the check back report?
No, but we are going to hear from the PUC in a
You see.
moment, so they'll tell
Okay,
us what's going on.
thank
So,
you.
yeah, great. Um, Anything else? If not, then I will turn to the minutes, which were sent around this morning, but they were also available by virtue of a link in the agenda. Um, I hope you've had a chance to review them. If not, let's take 30 seconds to do so. Does anyone have any changes they'd like to make? Are they satisfactory? And if so, would someone make a motion for approval?
So if I can, I just want to me, they were significantly different in terms of content from the earlier minutes. You know, they
Yeah,
largely just represented bullets from the agenda and large gaps, large periods of time with no no content.
yeah, Ken, the sense was that since we're recording the meetings now, that the minutes could be more summary.
Rick, if I may.
Yeah, please do, Dominic.
Ken, just to explain in a little more detail, open meeting law sets a minimum standard of what must be included in minutes to comply. And the most important point of that is any motions and their disposition. So exactly what Rick said, with the recording, we did not feel it was still necessary to go into detail and try to capture what discussions were. If people are interested in that, they can hear the discussions for themselves, and we don't have to run those discussions through our biases and understandings to characterize them. It is still important to have any motions, how they go through in the business of the organization. So the idea is from here on out with recordings, we will be any action this group takes will be recorded and put into the minutes. Everything else can be found in the recording.
Thanks, Dominic. Yeah. If there are no other thoughts, yes, Brian.
To that end, I would like to move to approve the minutes from the February 16, 2024 meeting as presented.
A second? Anyone second? Michelle Keller is seconded. With that, is there any discussion? And if none, all in favor say aye by raising one's hand or signaling with the hand. Great. Okay, the minutes are approved. Okay, that takes us to the next item, updates from the PUC. Deirdre, I'll turn it to you. Thank you.
Sounds good. So in the last 2 weeks since you've met, the Equity Advisory Group also met a few days after you did. We included minutes, and they also decided to record their meeting, so we included a recording of their meeting in the email sent around yesterday. We issued a request for comments on the process for determining annual emission reduction requirements. Those comments are due on Monday, and a workshop to discuss those comments is being held a week from today at about 10 a.m. We also issued the order amending the schedule in the -INV case. And just as a heads up, the next items in that case are going to be asking participants to weigh in on DDA evaluation criteria, eligibility, and compensation structure. And a workshop for that's going to be sometime in mid-March, and you'll obviously get notices from EPUC when that order goes out and when the workshop notice goes out. And then, of course, we submitted our 2 reports to the legislature, the one on funding streams and the first checkback report. That's mostly it for the last 2 weeks. I'm assuming some discussion or questions.
What about your consultant?
Yes, so we also have, so to kind of move along there, update on facilitation services. So we took your direction to pursue the Climate Alliance funding and specifically the Consensus Building Institute as the vendor to provide those facilitation services. The application has gone into the Climate Alliance to procure those services. We may be able to take advantage of those services before the funding is approved and contract is signed, but we'll keep you up to date on that effort. And then for the technical consultant, the contract is fully executed and we're able to share that we have selected Opinion Dynamics. It was a bit too short of notice to capture their full team to attend the meeting, but we're fortunate that Aaron is on the call. So Aaron, if you wouldn't mind introducing the firm, that would be awesome.
Great. Yeah, I'd be happy to do so. I see that I'm highlighted, so I assume you can all hear me. Great to be with you today. We're absolutely thrilled to be undertaking this work. I'm Erin. I'm the decarbonization director here at Opinion Dynamics. I personally sit in Maine, but we have colleagues in Vermont as well as many in Massachusetts and California and sort of sprinkled throughout the country. We're about 75 strong. And yes, we're again, thrilled to be undertaking this project, very appreciative of the opportunity to do so and acknowledging that, this is a pretty landmark process that we're all going through. So on behalf of my team, excited to undertake this project with all of you. Opinion Dynamics has a long history in research advisory and program evaluation, as well as a lot of technical consulting work on developing technical reference manuals. So we've done some sort of out of the box TRM development in the past, and so this seems like a really great extension of some of the work we've done before, and is really going to, I think, stretch the topic into new areas. So again, looking forward to it, and very nice to meet you all.
Thanks, Erin. And Ken, just a moment, I'll come to you. And we'll come back, obviously, Deirdre, to questions about your other points. Erin, I think it's a TAG's hope that you or one of your colleagues or several of your colleagues will attend our meetings on a regular basis and keep us updated on the work. It may make sense, and this may be an offline discussion for the purposes of putting together next meeting's agenda, but it may make sense for us to hear more in depth from you at our next meeting about how you plan to go about the work, where you're going to focus, what your priorities and sequencing are going to be, so that there's an alignment between what we think needs to be done and what you're doing. I want to make this as efficient and as productive a relationship as possible. But if that makes sense, we'll work with you in the next week or so to set up the agenda for that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. If I may just for a moment, we certainly don't anticipate this to just be an academic exercise. We're looking forward to collaboration and making sure that we're sort of streamlining our efforts. We have yet to have an official kickoff with the folks at the PUC. So I anticipate that we'll be doing that probably first, and then reapproaching the advisory group here with more of a defined schedule based on the outcome of that meeting. We do have an anticipated scope that includes close collaboration with this group. So we're definitely looking forward to that, and be happy to work to figure out how to make sure that our efforts are sort of sequenced in a way that makes the most sense.
Great, thank you. Ken, I believe your hand is up.
And that was my question. I'm hoping that getting a schedule as to when specific topics will be raised and when material can be developed with and shared with the TAG, that'll be really helpful. So, and you did mention the scheduling being an early part, so thank you for that.
Go ahead, Brian. You're still muted.
Yeah, I was waiting for the chair to recognize me. Oh, this is a question for, I think, Deirdre. Who's the project manager on your end? And I just wanted to confirm that the outline that Chair Weston laid out for the interaction with the contractor aligns with what your vision is as the actual contracting entity.
Sorry, the project manager for which piece?
For the contract manager for the Opinion Dynamics, the technical contractor.
Oh, so Tracy is going to be our liaison between Opinion Dynamics and the PUC.
Yeah, we haven't gotten as far as any particular plans. We are just now scheduling our meet and greet. The contract process, unfortunately, was just completed. So we'll definitely keep you guys in the loop, but we have not gotten as far as, I doubt they've even had the opportunity to look at your proposed timeline.
Thanks. TJ.
Thanks, Rick. Yeah, I just wanted to highlight for the PUC and for Aaron that the Department of Public Service was assigned the potential study, and just which also has measure characterization tasks associated with it. So as you're working in the kickoff, I just want to make sure that that was part of the discussion and working with our consultant, NV5. It'll be much more efficient in the long run to make sure that we're coordinating on assumptions.
Absolutely. Thank you. Great. Thank you very much. I'd like to open it up, the conversation, to any other questions for the PUC on any of the matters that Deirdre has reported on. TJ.
Well, I wonder if there's time, if, like a 2 or 3 minute overview from the PUC on, the executive summary of what their reports said. I know they were just filed yesterday. I have not had a chance to look into them, but subject to time and the chair's prerogative.
We have some time here, certainly, and I certainly wouldn't want to limit discussion. Deirdre, do you mind giving us the Cliff Notes version of the 2 reports?
Sure. So the funding streams report was really a kind of communicated what we heard back from participants, what we heard back from the groups, that it was too early to suggest a long-term administrative funding stream for the whole program, but that in the short term we recommended the general fund for both the commission and the department to finish the design process. And then for the check back report, it was really a status update of what kind of work we've done in the last 5 or so months, and reflected the comments that we received about pace and kind of the quality of comments that we're getting based on the pace that we've set. That's, we do want the reports to speak for themselves, obviously, but that is kind of the high level summary.
Ken.
Yeah, in terms of funding, the default delivery agent probably won't have a revenue stream until sometime in 2025. So is there something in the budget, the fiscal 25 budget, either of PUC or something submitted to the legislature, that provides resources to the default delivery agent?
No, not in the funding streams and not appropriated any funds. We're kind of still figuring out the funding for the default delivery agent.
Yeah, and you can see the challenge in that, the fiscal year budget is under discussion at the legislature, and it is fiscal 25 that the default delivery agent may and hopefully will begin work. So I don't know if there's a way to open to keep an opportunity open, or in terms of the PUC budget. I'm kind of at a loss. I don't know how a default delivery agent starts unless we assume that they front their entire costs, and with a possibility that in 2025 the rules are not accepted, in which case the DDA never has a revenue stream, in which case they've sunk money and have no opportunity to recapture it. That seems like a pretty big deal.
Yeah. Brian.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to go back briefly to the check back report. To put a finer point on it, I had an opportunity to read them both, and thank the commission folks for preparing them. I thought that the check back report really reflected that the schedule proposed by the legislature is extremely challenging, and that additional time would be beneficial for the entire process. That was certainly my takeaway.
Yes, that was mine too. Although there doesn't appear to be a specific ask in the report. So, Ken.
Yeah, I think the other argument has to be laid out, that a delay in enacting the clean heat standard effort makes accomplishing the target for the thermal sector by 2029 even more difficult. I think as we begin next week with the workshop on establishing the annual limits, annual targets, it's going to be clear that the later we start the trading process and provide greater incentives for accelerating clean heat measure, the much harder it is. And I know the argument in the check back report is many people are asking for more time. And I ran a nonprofit for 15 years that our function was to sponsor public participation in state environmental agency deliberation. And I would say comments from those 100 times as often you hear, we wish we had more time. But we have to ask the question, not only what happens if we delay in terms of meeting the target, but also what really does that extra time give us in terms of improving the quality of the product. And yes, we need to put a real focus on public engagement earlier. And I think we need to provide more substance in which to react, and not just have a lot of topics which are, how are we going to administer a clean heat standard? That's of course important in terms of getting it started, but where people are really going to be engaged is, how much is this going to cost? And if we spend a lot of time on the administrative detail and don't get to that, then you're right, people will feel frustrated when the ultimate bill comes due. So we'll have the discussion today about schedule, but I think there are opportunities for initiating some of the discussions about what will the clean heat standard really do, and I'll put the emphasis on economically. Those folks that have an economic interest in their heating systems and in selling heating fuels, that needs to happen quickly, and delaying the whole process, I'm not sure will actually improve the quality of public participation. So I think there has to be a message different than the single message that everybody thinks we need to extend the timeline. I, for one, absolutely disagree with that, and I'm sure there are others that do, but it's just harder for people to voice their opinion about, well, I don't think we should delay, because they don't know it's on the agenda. They don't know it's on the discussion plate that, oh, we may delay this. So I do think it's important to have a countering message out there about what delay really means.
Thanks, Ken. Emily?
I want to boost Ken's comments on this. I haven't fully digested the implications of delay in the way that Ken has, but I have been spending some time as I try to get up to speed as vice chair looking at the schedule. And I know we're going to be talking about the overall schedule, and it may be too late for the tag to weigh in on the schedule, but I'm not convinced that the way the tasks are chunked and ordered is going to be the most is going to make sense in every case, and also is going to be most effective at facilitating public input. Like, they're in really small chunks, and in my role at NESCOM, I'm involved in rule development processes related to clean heat standards, or at least I'm kind of monitoring those processes and keeping an eye on them in several other states. Massachusetts, for example, Maryland, and those are not being led by PUCs. They're being led by environmental agencies. I'm obviously not suggesting that here, but the process, I think, subsequently is going to look pretty different. Like in Massachusetts, they've developed like an entire program framework, put that out for public comment, and then they're going to kind of like put out like an entire set of draft rules and probably do public comments on that. But they're not going to be sort of chunking the items in such a kind of such that you every single little topic requires public comments and reply comments with specific intervals, but in a way that is like pretty hard to wrap your head around the implications and the intersections between the topics, especially if you're not following it very closely. So I'm not sure, and I know that I'm verging into the schedule. I'm not sure if there's an opportunity for the tag to influence the PUC schedule at this point. I also, as I was reviewing it, it's also clear that we've already fallen behind the schedule proposed by the PUC back in December. So we're already not on that track. So I guess what I'm saying is, were all of those individual steps required as originally laid out, then yes, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to meet the schedule, but I'm not convinced that's the only way to structure this type of a process, nor the most effective. And I'm not sure if it's too late to provide that feedback to the PUC, or if there's a mechanism for us to do so, or if it's totally set in stone. And I guess I'll end with a question, which is, to the PUC, which is, where do you all stand on the schedule? Because as I think, unless I missed it, I don't think we've seen a final schedule come through yet. So is it totally set in stone at this point, or is that coming soon? Is there an opportunity to influence? Like, where does that stand?
Yeah.
Deirdre, quick response on that? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. So definitely still an opportunity to influence the schedule. As we mentioned in the last meeting, that schedule is a work in progress. Our intent is still to formalize that, to let people kind of get a heads up on when we plan to ask about certain things, the weeks in which we plan to have workshops on certain things. But as we mentioned, we anticipate that to evolve as the advisory groups get going and our consultants get going. So that's still a work in progress. We still intend to update it. But yes, absolutely. We plan to hear your suggestions today on schedule and organization of tasks. So still definitely ripe for discussion.
Great. Thank you. Brian.
Yes, just a point of order. It wasn't my intent to dive into a discussion of the schedule, since that's item 6. I just wanted to acknowledge at least what I thought was, an important message from the check back report. But I leave it to the chair to decide whether we want to resequence the schedule. I don't want to shortchange the report from the Equity Advisory Group, which I know we're all looking forward to hearing as well.
Right. No. Thank you, Brian. No, I was, as I was listening to this conversation, I was thinking that Ken and Emily are the implication of their comments is that that the tag in some way or another report to, and we can do this through a resolution or just through the minutes themselves, that we report to the PUC in some way or another, as to how we feel about the schedule and what should or should not happen. I suggest that if that's where the members want to go, we have that conversation. I think really it may even make sense at the end of the work group discussion when we have gone through, we spent some time thinking about the implications of the schedule and the work that we want to do. And then we may want to say something to the PUC, a short pithy statement about what we think needs to happen. Is your hand still up, Brian?
It is, because I'm not clear if that means we're going to hear from the Equity Advisory Group or we're still talking about the sequencing of the tag.
It means that we'll move. It means that we'll move on to the Equity Advisory Group. But just so you know, we're still ahead of this. We're doing well on the time of the agenda as well, so we're okay. But thank you,
Okay.
Emily. Your hand's up and you're muted. Did you have something more you wanted to say?
Sorry, I was talking. We are still going to cover the schedule item in a minute, and then we can also circle back on a recommendation just to kind of follow up on the technical consultant introduction. I do think I'm not sure I would feel ready to provide a recommendation quite yet as of today. I'd be interested in learning about this technical consultant schedule because I've seen their original schedule. It's clear we're already not on that schedule. And then I also have questions about how some of the PUC topics that are coming up are kind of like, anyway, I don't need to go into it now, but I would love to sort of put all that side by side and have a chance to understand it a little bit better and then come back to this group with maybe a recommendation.
Well, that's fine, but that's a discussion we can have.
Okay.
Sure. If there's nothing else, anything else nothing else rather, with respect to the PUC's updates, we can move on. Great. Okay. This is great. We're going to hear from the Equity Advisory Group. I turn it again to you, Deirdre, to facilitate that.
I'll actually go ahead and take this one, Rick. So the Equity Advisory Group last met on February 5th, and one of the things that took up a lot of time in their discussion was coming to a mutual understanding of equity and how they want to apply it to the work that they're doing as part of the CHS design process. One of their materials that they worked off of was Austin, Texas's community climate plan, and there was a listing of priorities enumerated in that plan that they agreed with, felt was important, and wanted to communicate to the technical advisory group as priorities to keep in mind. You can see the text of the full resolution footnoted in you can see the gist of the resolution footnoted in the agenda. In the minutes for the group, it is fully enumerated, and I'll read that here. The Equity Advisory Group would like to communicate to the Technical Advisory Group that the list on page 94 of the preparatory materials, which contains 7 objectives with the addition of availability and geographic context, is a priority of the Equity Advisory Group, and the group requests that the Technical Advisory Group keeps the objectives in mind, subject to change and further development to make sure it is specific to Vermont. To put that in a little more plain of language, the 7 priorities enumerated in the Austin Climate Plan are health, affordability, accessibility, just transition, community capacity, cultural preservation, and accountability. There are some more details in the link of that resolution, and then they also added in availability, specifically in a geographic context, especially as we are looking at installed clean heat measures. At this point in time, they are not available throughout the entire state. The gist of this is, as you guys as this group goes through its very important work, that if you're keeping these 8 principles or priorities in mind, it will help to make sure that this is a equitably designed program. I'm happy to take any questions on it.
Thank you, Dominic. That's very helpful. Let me just start with, I'll have to go back to the, as you say, the Austin Climate Plan. I assume that the 7 priorities there are defined. Thank you. There, I see it's,
Correct.
Pardon me?
Correct. They are defined. I just dropped a link in the chat.
Yep. Great. Thank you very much. Questions from others? Brian.
Thank you. Dominic, did the equity advisory group have any discussion about how they recommend that the tag, I don't know, keep these in mind or act on them or, operationalize them? Or is that still too early, or is that coming?
If there are any members of the EAG here today that would like to comment on that, please do. My recollection of the conversation was about choosing the set of priorities and then making sure that the tag was aware of them. There are additional actions that the EAG will be taking, specifically at their next meeting on Tuesday, to look at benchmarking systems, to look at these priorities and a way to measure them against the work. So at this point, it's more of a keep it in mind, but we hope to have more in the future. And I do see Emily Roscoe's hand is up as she's also a member of the EAG.
Thanks, Dominic. Yeah, everything you said is correct from my end. I think just reinstating that there's nothing expected to be done with the tag with this information. I think we just wanted to communicate that these were objectives that we like and identify with, and just wanted to start communicating with the tag that this is what we're looking at.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you very much. Any other questions or points of clarification? Gosh, we're models of efficiency so far. Thank you very much, Dominic, Emily. That was very helpful. Although, nope, Emily Levin, your hand is up, or did you just put it down?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Now you're very scratchy.
Yeah, I think I'm having a connectivity issue. Is it any better now?
No, not at all.
No. Okay. Let me restart and I'll make this. I'll put a comment in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, you might want to just hang up and come back. Yeah. Okay. I encourage folks to mute when you're not speaking. We're getting a little bit of feedback here and there on some of these discussions. Well, thank you very much. Okay. Ken, Emily's coming back on. I'm going to have to turn to you. I hope and she'll have to jump in when she gets back in. But let's turn to the schedule and the sequencing of tag tasks and your initial thoughts. You've done some work in preparation for this. If you'd like to take us through it, that'd be great.
Sure. I want to start with an apology. I noted in the minutes that the motion that kind of led to this put a specific emphasis on establishing prices by the default delivery agent and obligated parties. And I mistakenly thought, I had done some writing on that, and I had mistakenly thought that had been shared with everyone, and it hasn't. So I'll just go and I've had some discussions with folks at the Public Service Department, so I'll just kind of give a summary of that specific topic. And the reason why I brought it up last time, and I think it's so important, is that this is where this topic of, okay, how much is this going to cost? And it's not certainly a definitive, final, comprehensive answer, but it's a starting point. And under the kind of the current legislation, and if it's adhered to in a way, well, I'll just describe its adherence. The default delivery agent is established in the summer, whether it's June 1st or a little bit later. And one of their first products is a 3-year budget. And in that budget, they establish a credit price. And I'll say the way the legislation is written, that shouldn't happen until after the Public Service Department's capacity study is complete. So it's after September 1st. And okay, so September 1st happens. Let's give the DDA a month. So October, and that's rapid, of course, but hopefully they'll have information prior to that so that they're not just starting from scratch. But anyway, October 1st, they establish a 3-year plan that includes the price of credits. And that starts a 4-month, 120-day clock for the obligated parties to essentially respond. The obligated parties are given the opportunity to develop plans to show how they are going to adhere to their own annual requirements, which of course won't have been established. But still, they can provide a plan that because part of their opportunities are they can buy credits from the default delivery agent, or they can do work on their own to establish credits. And for the default delivery agent needs to know in general, well, how much, if they're going to do it on their own, that means that's work we're not going to do, which means we have to affect our budget. So October 1st, the DDA submits a budget. 4 months later, which I believe is February 1st, the obligated parties provide their plans, and then the statute says the default delivery agent gets to modify, of course, has to modify its budget. So that takes us into March or March at the very most rapid of 2025. And again, I don't remember if I brought this up at the last meeting, but that's a real challenge because on January 15th of 2025, the rules are submitted to the legislature. And I think there's a parallel with what happened with the Climate Action Plan, where the economic issue, where people repeatedly ask the question, what's it going to cost? What's it going to cost? What's it going to cost? And that happened in the Climate Action Plan at a very, very late date. And from my perspective, really didn't happen in a satisfactory fashion. It established this is what it's going to, this is the net impact by the year 2050. And I don't really think that informed people's understanding of what the next few years are going to be like. I don't want that to happen again. Well, in part, it's hard for me to imagine the legislature taking a look at the rules without any sense of what it's going to cost. So anyway, that's as statute is written. And then the Public Service Department noted there's a potential piece of legislation. I guess it's been drafted. There's a placeholder to actually delay the assignment of the default delivery agent 6 months after approval of the rules, which puts us well into 2025, and it takes that schedule, which I had just laid out, and delays it at least a year, so that would mean that the final credit costs wouldn't be established until March of 2026. And all of this has led me to pose a question to a few folks, and I think I want the question kind of included in the minutes here. I've had discussions with folks about when does the expectation that the obligations begin for an obligated party. It could be in 2025. If the rules are passed in 2025, it could be in 2025. But there are people out there that did not have that assumption. They said if the rules are passed in 2025, that means the obligation begins in 2026. And if the obligation begins in 2026, that means the actual market mechanism doesn't come into play, doesn't even begin until 2026. And from my way of thinking, it only gives you 2027 and 2028 to meet the 2029 targets, which again, getting my earlier comment, the compressing of the schedule makes this really, really hard. So then that's even prefacing the work that Emily and I have been working on that led to the memo that you folks have, which is looking at the full set of activities, not just the price setting mechanism of the default delivery agent, but all of the activities that are necessary in order to really to establish a market, to establish value. And value there are two different values here, and we need to be really clear when we use the word value. There is the emissions reduction value of a clean heat measure. In other words, how many tons of carbon it will reduce. And there is an economic value. What does it cost in terms of either the development of a credit to take the actions that lead to those reductions, or the purchase of a credit? So that word value, we want to be clear, because I know that the language, maybe the language in statute, but the language clearly that's being used in the Public Utility Commission, whenever they use the word value, they're almost always talking about the emissions value, the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions that result from the implementation of a measure. And that's great. That's a good, clear use. But for other people that may not be tuned in to these deliberations, they hear the word value and they may think it's economic value. How much will a credit cost? So anyway, that's still a subset. So again, what the memo you folks have is a look at all of the activities that have been scheduled so far in the draft schedule that the Public Utility Commission put out in December. And we tried to, there's a lot of little pieces. So we tried to collect them in a way that we can see how some of those pieces add up to what's going to be easier to communicate in terms of a product. And the characterization of credits, establishing the annual limits, both in total and the process to assign those limits to individual obligated parties, the identification of the other impacts, just as the Equity Advisory Group highlighted for us. What are the health impacts? What are the impacts on the cultural pieces? Each one of their elements there is something that we have a responsibility in statute to identify what are the impacts of the implementation of a clean heat measure on those many, many attributes that go beyond greenhouse gas emission and go beyond economic cost. So we did include, and I don't want to merge the two, because again, in statute, even economically, we need to really understand the impact on low and moderate income households. That's another piece as this gets unrolled, and there's a lot. We know this. There's a lot. But as we unroll the characterization of a clean heat measure, is there a difference when those measures are implemented in a low and moderate income household or a more of a market, less low and moderate income household? So that's another piece that needs to happen. And then, in some ways, overarching all this is how this gets administered. So in the memo, we identified the specific pieces listed in the December draft schedule and put them in those clumps. And a reason for putting in those clumps, and I'll if Emily's back on, I'll hand the baton back to her, is yes, if we look at this schedule and say every one of the little pieces requires an announcement for comment, a receipt of comment, a review of comment, and then leading to a PUC decision. There's a lot there, and folks that wish to provide comments will just continually be submitting comment. And if there's a way to cluster these activities so that we can see what the bigger product looks like and what the bigger product might look like and get comments on that, it limits the number of required times that someone feels they need to provide comment. But I also think you get better comments in that you can see a bigger picture. You're reacting to a bigger picture rather than a piece. It's so hard to see how these little pieces fit together. But when we start to see an overall credit characterization, which has we use heat pumps as an example, we can see the types of heat pumps, the type of heat pump installation, the size of the heat pump, and from that say, okay, this is how many credits, this is how much ton reduction we will see, again, over a time period. But all of these are in pieces, little pieces that are seeking comments. But if we can bring a product like that and then get comments, I think it'll be much more robust set of comments, and I think a more engaging mechanism than, again, trying to have people speculate as to how the little piece fits into the whole. So I talked a lot there. Emily, if you're on, I can't tell if you're on. If you're on,
Yeah, she is Ken. But Matt's had his hand up for a bit, so I'm going to go to Matt first, then to Emily. And what we'll want to do is, see where this takes us and how it affects certainly the next item on the agenda. But this is very helpful. Thank you very much, Matt. Please, and then Emily.
Thanks, Rick. And thanks, Ken, for this focus on timing, because I agree this is critically important. Just a couple of comments based on some of your things and things that I need clarified. Speaking on behalf of, again, the people that will be obligated and those that will be generating credits. So first, yes, it's unclear when this obligation will start, but we know that the credit generation has already started. We're 14 months in to generating credits. So that's a thing, and that will, we talk about the DDA and what they have. I mean, I remember the DDA may be wholly unnecessary, and we're earning credits, and what is the credit obligation based on? Those are the things that we need to know. Is it based on prior year sales? So if the first credit showing or determination of whether or not we've met those obligations by creating clean heat credits or producing clean heat credits, what is that date? We need to know that, and what is that based on? What is it? It's based on the prior year, the prior quarter, the prior month. All these need to be sorted out for the obligated parties to understand what their impact is. And I really do appreciate Ken's focus on cost, because we need to know what that cost is, because it will be passed on to the consumers. Finally, there are 3 ways that the obligated party will meet these obligations to produce credits. One is in the case of a large wholesaler that does not want to blend biofuel, they will simply make the alternative compliance payment to the default delivery agent, and that will be that. For a heating fuel retailer, they may not bother to write one check at all. No, nothing at all. They'll create all their own credits and they'll barter further all their credits. But there'll be a whole bunch of obligated entities that will fall in the middle that won't know exactly how many credits they'll need, because there'll be a bit of doing it themselves, bartering, buying, and also not having enough and having to make a partial payment. And so there's going to be 3 ways that obligated parties comply with this law should the rules be adopted. And I think just want to highlight that going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Much appreciated. Emily Levin, please.
Well, first of all, is my microphone any better?
Yes, much better.
Okay, yeah, I think I have to keep my camera off until things improve over here. Yeah, so a couple of observations that I had from assembling the schedule, and I missed the beginning of Ken's presentation, so I assume he was just walking through it. But well, one thing was that it took me a little while to realize that when you see sort of the topics laid out on the PUC schedule, one of the reasons the order can seem confusing is that it says like you're going to get to credit values, you know, right away, but what they really mean is the process for setting the credit values, not the actual credit values. So there's like a process step before getting into the actual value setting step, but it can be hard to kind of wrap your head around the difference between those two things. And related to the kind of characterizing clean heat measures and setting credit values, I guess I have some questions about that because it seems like, and maybe this is again because we're focused on the process first and then getting into the actual schedules, but it seems to me that you would need to do the carbon intensity of fuels piece before you could do the emission schedule piece, all of which would then feed into the credit values, which is again the GHG reductions associated with each credit piece. And so that was sort of a question I had because it seems like we're supposed to be setting the credit values before we get to the emission schedule of the carbon intensity of fuels piece, which was confusing to me in this schedule. So maybe I'll just pause there and see if anyone um, from the state like has looked at this further and can explain that to me a little bit more. Is it just because we're doing the process for the credit values and then we're doing the actual work for the other ones and that's why they appear to be out of sequence? Or does anybody want to speak to that?
Deirdre,
Any
would you like me to
volunteers?
provide?
Dominic?
Emily, I'm not sure if this will exactly answer your question, so please let me know if I'm off base. But the order that is out right now with a request for comments, how I've been describing a lot internally is we're here right now in, on February 16th of 2024, we've got a level of carbon emissions associated with the thermal sector in Vermont. GWSA sets goals at intervals up to 2050. We know that we need to hit those points. Because we are operating on an annual basis, we need to draw a line between the points. But it's not going to just be a straight line. The shape of that line is going to be determined by a number of factors, many of which will be analyzed in the potential study. There's things like market capacity, funding sources, the technology available to reduce carbon emissions. The request for comment we have right now is asking what is the process and what information will we need to draw the line from where we are today to where we need to be at the various points in the future. Once we determine the process for drawing that line, we will get the information from all the available sources, primarily the potential study, but it likely won't be the only source of information. And we will go through the process that we've set now with the information that we then have to draw that line. I'll stop there for a second. Is that answering your question? Does what I said make sense to people who aren't drowning in this every day?
Sorry, just turning my mic back on. That answer makes sense to me, or that process makes sense to me, but it didn't answer my question because if you're looking at the memo, what you just described, I think is, relates to sort of the first area of work, which is defining the levels of GHG reductions needed. And my sequencing questions relate more to the second area, which is characterizing clean heat measures and setting credit values. And it's those tasks that are confusingly ordered to me. And that's especially where we need a lot of close coordination with the technical consultant with Opinion Dynamics, because right now it appeared to me if the draft schedule were to stand that we're supposed to be providing input on things well before we would be getting resources and proposals from the consultant. So I think the way this should work is that like we give the consultant some time to get started and
they start kind of organizing the work, and then they bring things to us to react to. And then we just need to align the PUC process so that it kind of occurs at the appropriate time relative to the technical consultant's work and when resources and inputs will actually be available. But yeah, so hopefully that's something that's not set in stone and we can revisit as we go and get a little further with the technical consultant.
Oh, absolutely, Emily. It's not, I don't believe it is set in stone at this point, and we'll have a conversation with the technical consultant next week, indeed. There are several hands up. Matt, then Brian, then TJ.
Sorry, old hand. I'll turn it down.
Okay. Brian. And Emily, your hand is still up, so we'll come back to you. Brian.
Thank you. Thanks, Dominic. I think that's kind of the way, what you've explained is kind of the way I understand it. But where does the line start? Is this out in 2025? Like the first trajectory is from when to 2030, and then obviously the second trajectory is 2030 to 2050, right?
Correct. I am pulling up the law right now. My initial answer is the potential study. And maybe TJ can speak more to this, but the point in time which the potential study captures is the now. And I want to say I am getting a little.
I just lost Dominic.
Yeah, so did I. Dominic, you somehow got muted.
Wasn't me.
Yeah.
All right.
I hang on his every word.
Every word. Just when you said, yeah, you'll need to repeat what you were just saying.
Okay, absolutely. I want to preface this by saying my answer is just a touch over my skis. So I want to say that this is my understanding and my answer to your question. The now is the point in time at which the potential study, the potential study captures. That is the now, and then we have the places that, from that now to 2030, and then all the way out to 2050, and that is evaluated in 10-year chunks that are reassessed triennially.
Okay, so then I'll pass it to TJ.
Yep. Okay.
Talk about the potential study.
Yep. Please, TJ, if you do want to jump in, that'd be great. But right now, Ken's hand is up. So I'll start with him.
Yeah, just on that topic of when things start, because credits start being eligible in January 1st, 2023. And we're going to have a workshop on this next Friday. But I've been working under the presumption that the clock starts where the clean heat standard begins to have impact is January 1st, 2023. So that the baseline year is 2022. So that's been my kind of presumption. And granted, yeah, the credit numbers don't get established until either 2025 or 2026, but it is from 2022 because of the implementation of creditable measures starting in 2023.
Thanks, Ken. No other hands up, but TJ, were you going to jump in? That'd be great.
Sure. So I think the current scope of the potential study is from 2026 to 2050 with an emphasis on the near term through 2030. So that's kind of what the potential study is. I don't know if it is just to Ken's last comment. I don't know if it's a good use of time to focus on like the year of the start. If we just start we just have to hit a target in 2030, right? Like we know what our reduction is necessary to meet 2030. And so if we start tracking from 2025. The early action credits are great. Some people have them. We're just going to need to actually add those to the amount of clean heat credits necessary for obligated entities to retire, because we have to actually get to 2030. Like there's like a hard target that we need to get to. We could start in 2023, and those credits, maybe that's a little easier to account for, but I just think it gets to the same result. So I don't know that it matters that much. So yeah, I guess I'm not sure what you meant, Dominic, with the focus on the now for the potential study. The potential study is going to try and see what kind of market penetration is achievable given, like you said, workforce constraints and market barriers, et cetera, and will give us a basis for, I think, what ultimately is going to need to happen in order to set requirements is to select a measure mix that we think might happen in that iterative process, so we can translate life cycle clean heat credits to actual measured reductions according to the greenhouse gas inventory as required by the Global Warming Solutions Act.
Thanks, TJ. Brian?
Yeah, my perspective is on the target is we know what the reduction, like what the emissions need to be, both economy-wide and sector-based, or we have the Climate Council determined that the sector percentage reductions are going to be based on 2018 emissions. We could adopt that. We could do something else. It's about a third of economy-wide emissions from some, and the baseline year is going to be in the inventory, 2005 for 2025 and 1990 for 2030. If we update the methodology in the inventory, those numbers might change a little bit. So I think we know what the emissions need to be. I think what we don't know is what the emission reductions need to be, because we don't know what emissions in the sector are going to be in any particular year. So, we need to, part of this process is establishing, like, here's the emissions level that is allowed. To calculate the reductions, you have to say reductions from where, and whether if we pick a number, then that might need to be adjusted because it's probably not going to be the baseline. So to me, that, like, I just wanted to clarify what I think the situation is. The Act says you need to get these reductions from these baselines economy-wide, but in the end, we don't know what the actual reductions are going to be because the emissions in every sector and the RCI sector are going to vary over time. So you really couldn't say we need these emissions reductions next year based upon what it is from this year.
I see. Thank you. TJ.
Yeah, and I agree with what you're saying there, Brian. And I just want to kind of bring it back. I'm struggling a little with the role of this group in this discussion here. We have as the PC mentioned, there's the comment deadline on the process. I think it's Monday, right? Or maybe it's Tuesday, on the process for setting how we set greenhouse gas obligations and reduction requirements. And so it seems to me that this group, we're getting out ahead of ourselves a little bit because we have like these policy comments from a lot of the same people who are in the room, but not everybody, and a different set of people that we're going to have a workshop next week and presumably reply comments. And then whatever comes out of that, it seems like the PUC then needs to run by the tag and say, what are the technical issues with this? And maybe that's like, maybe that's too late. Maybe what are the technical issues with this need to come like immediately after the workshop before the reply comments or something. But that that seems to be the role of this group to me, unless I'm missing something. Instead of setting the schedule, because we have a whole nother process to do that, or setting the process, where we just need to identify, flag, and solve for technical issues. Can I get clarification?
Well, that's a fair question, I think, TJ, and I think it's going to inform the next part of our agenda. But I think what you are hearing is some anxiousness on the parts of some of our members to really start rolling up our sleeves and start thinking about these issues, and perhaps in parallel with the very process you just described. And next week's workshop is obviously an important point for this. To start thinking about how we might be able to help the PUC, even as it is, in fact, dealing with the comments as well, and thinking about, what it needs to put before us. So I hear you, but I think as well we want to start, as I say, rolling up our sleeves. You wanted to respond?
Well, yeah, I don't get me wrong. I think this conversation has been valuable, and the way I think about it is that helps inform, like, refining the comments that we're going to file on Monday. But is this group going to write a memo that says this is the tags proposed? Even though each individual has separate comments that are filed, that doesn't. I don't know if that seems like the right process, but if we're just acting as a venue to discuss, I think that is one path. It's just not clear
on the schedule itself. You're asking.
Well, on the process for greenhouse gas reduction, to set greenhouse gas reduction requirements.
I think the answer to your question is we could, if this group came together and said, hey, we think that the process ought to look like this, A, B, C, D, and whatever. We could say that in a motion that would be adopted, and it would then go to the PUC, or we don't. The conversation, as you say, has its value, and the staff are hearing it, and certainly the PUC the commission itself will understand what we're thinking about. We have choices, in other words. At this point, I don't know what we're going to decide, if anything.
Right. Yeah, and so we talked about this a little bit last time, and I still think that the best role for this committee that we could play is to be responsive to kind of the comments that are filed by individual stakeholders and discuss, via venue during, like we are now, and then see if there are any issues when the PUC says, okay, here's what we came up with, tag what are the issues to that? Because I find that it's going to be hard for us to come together with a consensus, or I guess we don't need consensus, but a document that says tag thinks this organically.
Right. Okay. I hear you. Thanks. Emily Roscoe.
Hi. Yeah, not to keep reinstating what I said in the last tag meeting as well, but just wanted to support what TJ was saying, and strongly encourage the tag to consider that approach as well, responding to materials that are put in front of us. I think knowing that we have comments due on Monday in the workshop, it seems like we'll be reiterating what we have to say in the next meeting if we decide to come up with a recommendation. But I think responding to materials put in front of us seems like a more efficient use of our time.
Thanks, Emily. Okay, we're still on schedule. I'd like to, unless there are other comments from TAG members, I'd like to open this discussion briefly to members of the public who might want to jump in. I ask if it's at all possible that members of the public keep their comments to 2 minutes, if possible. Dylan Giambattista, please.
Yeah, hello. Hopefully you can hear me. Thanks everyone for their work today. Just wanted to say generally on this topic of how to approach the sequencing and the topics. We've been supportive of the process before the PUC and the draft schedule in terms of having comment periods and so forth. But I think it's an interesting question of could some of these be lumped together to provide greater context to those who might want to respond. So certainly open to that concept as well. The other thing, I just want to pose a question. I'm not sure that it's in order for me to pose a question and expect a response, but just maybe for public information purposes, it's a state holiday Monday, as I understand it. So I'm assuming that as these things go, the submission for the comments due Monday would actually be end of business the next business day. So for what that's worth, hopefully that's correct information. And thank you.
No, Dylan, you've got to work on the holiday. I'm sorry. I suspect that's correct, and the PUC will act accordingly. Any other input from folks? Emily Levin. Well, let's see. No, Emily, Annette, please.
Well, I'm glad Dylan raised that question. I had the same question. I wonder if someone from the PUC could respond to it, because if it is a state holiday, then the PUC's rules generally do push it to the next day. And so could you please clarify what the status is for Monday's comments? Thank you.
This is Tom Nauer. Yeah, Annette and Dylan, you're both correct. Our practice is if we have erroneously put a deadline on a state holiday due to working too quickly, or for any other reason, yes, the deadline would be the following business day.
Great, thanks.
Could I ask one more question then?
Sure.
I'm noticing that a lot of people file their comments after 4:30, and in general, close of business at the PUC is after 4:30. So I'd just like to get some clarification on if there are different rules for this proceeding than in a contested case. I don't really see it as a problem. I just I wondered. Thanks.
Tom, Deirdre, any thoughts on that?
I don't think it would be appropriate for us to say anything on that one. That feels more like a legal conclusion. So, if we run into a problem with that and someone asks us to resolve it, that'll be a live question before the commissioners, and I just don't want to say the wrong thing here today.
Okay.
I recognize that that's a question, Annette, and I hope that you appreciate that I'm not in a position to answer it for the commission in real time.
Thank you.
Yep, thanks, Tom. Okay, two more hands up, and then we'll move on. Emily Levin, then Emily Roscoe. Well, Emily Roscoe's put her hand down. Emily Levin.
Yeah, I think I finally worked out some of my I was just unfortunately during that whole conversation that I was supposed to be co-facilitating, I was having a lot of technical difficulties. So I just wanted to jump in with a couple of additional thoughts on the schedule. One, I really agree with the comments from TJ that in an ideal world, I think this would look like somebody from the state, compiles the public input, sort of summarize the issues for the tag, and then we have an opportunity to discuss. So I had flagged on our schedule that that is coming up specifically on the GHG emission reduction requirements process issue, and that the schedule has the PUC making a decision on process by April, so that we should provide our recommendations in March. I don't think we need to do them today, but I was hoping at our next meeting, if somebody could provide us that summary of the issue, and then we would have an opportunity to kind of discuss it and see if we're going to generate feedback. That's like the most time sensitive issue, it appears. So I just wanted to flag that was my hope, that we would get to that at the next meeting, and that I do agree with TJ that in general it would be helpful if we could sequence our work in that manner. Um, and then I think um, we'll discuss this more when we get to our subgroup discussion. But the other thing that was, I was trying to sort of overlay like what's on the PUC schedule and how the issues are structured with what the TAG's actual legislated responsibilities are. And there are areas where we have a very clear assignment, and then areas where there are indirect implications of our work, but it's not totally clear. So we can discuss that more when we get to the next point. But that was another kind of takeaway for me. But I am just overall really glad to hear that we'll have an opportunity to influence the schedule and maybe the structure of the tasks, and look forward to working with you all on that over the next few weeks, especially now that we've got the consultant teams in place.
Thanks, Emily. Emily Roscoe.
Apologies, I'm just going back to Annette's comment. This isn't an answer, more just, I think, a note that at least when Efficiency Vermont or VEIC files comments, the notice comes out much later than when comments are filed. And I've heard that that's due to the size of the parties in the proceeding. So in the case, so just wanted, not really providing an answer, but just wanted to note that those notices are coming out an hour plus later than I think at least we're filing, if that helps.
Thanks. Emily Levin, with respect to your first question about the provision of summaries of the comments that are being made, we can have a conversation with the staff at the PUC about that as we engage on the agendas coming up. I do think, however, as a general matter, TAG members are going to need to read the full comments as much as possible of the parties. There's going to be a lot to them, and that we need to digest. And in fact, that it seems to me this is a good segue for our next agenda item. That in fact that's something that our work groups in particular can, if we decide to create work groups, can take on. That we would be looking to subsets of us to lead us in those areas of discussion, and that may be a role that they can play. So with that, let's go to the next topic, if we can, if we may. And I'll tell you what I was thinking, and it's just to lead off the discussion and see what folks think. And it's really this simple. There are as Ken and Emily's memo shows, and as the schedule shows, and as this discussion reminds us, there's a lot to do, and there's a lot to get our heads around. And I just got to thinking, and in conversations with a number of you, forgive me for not being able to get in touch with all of you over the last 2 weeks, but with a number of you, I did get this sense that I described earlier, that we're a desire to roll up our sleeves, to use that metaphor again, and start thinking about issues, and put them in a sequence that is going to obviously serve the PUC's needs, and of course our requirements under the law. So I threw down in the agenda 6 ideas, and they're just ideas for different work groups. And I wouldn't, I don't expect for a moment that we're going to create 6 work groups right now. But in response, after, as I say, chatting with a number of you, these are some of the ideas that emerged. It seems to me, and TJ, your thoughts on this, given your most recent comments, will be very helpful. It does seem to me that groups of 3 of us, and we are looking for volunteers, can sit down and start thinking about what the critical issues are, and start preparing the group for doing just what in fact TJ, you and others are suggesting, and I agree with, that we will respond to the needs of the PUC and uh, and digest and synthesize the comments of the parties, and we'll have something to say, or I hope we'll have something to say on the various issues, and it would be very, it seems to me, efficient and helpful, very helpful, if we have smaller groups leading the way and reporting back to the tag and leading us in this in the various subject matter areas. That's my thought. With that, let me just open it up and see what folks think, and let's go from there. We set some time aside for this. Um, Let me open it up. Ken.
Yeah, I do hear the challenge of, what is the tag's role? But I want to throw out a couple of a set of examples. We know that, first of all, the life cycle analysis, that draft has been done, and I know that wasn't done for us. Okay. And it looks like I've had a chance to look at the draft. It's a really solid piece of work, but we still have some questions. It does not answer all of the questions we need answered for using a life cycle analysis based assessment of greenhouse gas emissions from the use of fuels.
Sorry, Ken, just really quick, what are you referring to? Who did this life
So,
cycle analysis of what for who?
yeah, so the Agency of Natural Resources, I think this, and Brian, you tell me the origins of this. They've had a consultant work on determining the life cycle emissions from the full range of thermal and transportation fuels. And the big focus of that work is the upstream emissions. In other words, the creation of gasoline, or in our case, heating oil, the creation of propane, the creation of natural gas, creation, transport, getting it to the point of combustion is not included in the inventory-based approach for assigning greenhouse gas emissions. So the life cycle analysis does, and that's what we're supposed to use. And it does, I say, a very good job of that. But we're still going to have issues with regards, in particular, to woody biomass and the use of renewable biodiesel. And I apologize if I don't use the right terms in terms of biologically sourced as opposed to fossil sourced liquid fuels, and the same with renewable natural gas. It still doesn't account for things that I think we're going to want to account for. And it's that is kind of an example. And again, I certainly don't blame that effort. That effort did exactly what it was supposed to do. But for us to use products like that, it will be helpful if we can state more clearly, hey, we're going to need this. And that's why I think some of these work groups, a product from some of these work groups is we can, roughly deal with some topics. You put in a heat pump. How do you consider a heat pump in terms of its emissions? And I know the consultants will be working on that, but we have a very specific application. We have to assign a credit so that those credits can be exchanged, and those credits then have a relationship to overall emissions. And that may be different than the starting point, than how the consultants are addressing their characterization issue. And I'll guess one of the big ones that I think has come up today is the capacity study. And I've looked a little bit, and of course TJ knows this in much greater detail, but there are multiple capacities. There's certainly a technical capacity, and there's also a market capacity. How much are Vermonters going to be able to spend in the year 2025, 26, so in order to put in heat pumps as the example? And so understanding that market is hugely important. And I'm not sure that the consultant can really come up with a concrete solution, which is why I believe this is a huge role for public engagement. But also, and I jumped ahead, also one of the interesting pieces is when we set these annual targets, if by near the end of the year, the grand we is not able to create enough credits. Yes, there's a mechanism in place for the Public Utility Commission to essentially put an emergency order to say, oh, never mind. That's a bit rude, but okay, we give you a delay. But if not, the market goes crazy. In other words, there aren't enough credits to be purchased. Therefore, the price goes through the roof. Having a discussion like that, I think, is different than what the consultants are going to do when they look at the market pressures on installing a heat pump. And so us having some of those example discussions and then say, hey, what if? And provide that to the consultants, I think can be really helpful. And as I say, I think there are literally a dozen of those topics that, is it the TAG's role to identify them? I don't know, but we can. So let's give it a shot. And ultimately, it's going to relate to the work that we do get to review. But, I think there's going to be a lot of translation from consultant reports to what we actually need. And if we can get some of that jump started, that's one of the reasons to have some working groups kind of develop some draft ideas and run through some draft scenarios as to how this might work.
Thanks, Ken. Brian, then Luce.
Well, gee, Ken, that was a whole list of stuff that I'm not going to try and address. I'll talk about the thing that I actually know about, which is the life cycle analysis. You mentioned at the outset that you weren't sure the genesis of that. So back during the development of the climate action plan, during it was meeting of the, I hope I have it right, the science and data group, there was extensive comment that was received regarding the inventory, which is on a gross basis, and how the inventory is not acknowledging life cycle emissions from particular sectors. In particular, Hydro-Quebec was one that was called out as now being, the gross emissions being zero from electricity from Hydro-Quebec was not representative of what the true emissions were, and that we needed to acknowledge that in some way. So the agency had contracted with the Eastern Research Group, as Ken said, to develop a life cycle analysis of the sectors and the energy pathways that are in the inventory and can represent it properly. But what they have done is they have developed a system boundary for the life cycle emissions for the upstream emissions. So emissions that occur from raw materials extraction all the way to the point of use. And the idea is that if you want like the total emissions from, let's say fuel oil or natural gas or a renewable product, that you would add up the emissions, which are largely based on GREET, the upstream emissions plus the combustion emissions, and you would get total emissions. We're planning to include that analysis as a supplement to the inventory. So the inventory numbers, the inventory methodology is going to remain pretty much the same for consistency purposes, and that will remain the methodology that's going to be used to determine the compliance with the achievement of the Global Warming Solutions Act targets. But we are planning to add this addendum that says, if you're interested in what our emissions are on a life cycle basis, we did this analysis and here's what they look like. And Ken is, again, correct in that for biofuels, that analysis does not include the any sequestration regarding biofuels, or the idea that the carbon cycle for biofuels is much shorter than it is for fossil. Just very briefly, the consultant said, in the inventory analysis, that comes in when you talk about the agriculture, forestry, and other land use sector. And so we don't want to double count those reductions. I don't want to get into any more detail than that. So that's the purpose of that report. My understanding is that that the potential study contractor is going to be doing some of this work, and certainly the Opinion Dynamics, I think, is going to absolutely be doing these life cycle analysis pathways for in particular for the clean heat measures, which is a little bit different than what it is for the inventory, because there are clean heat measures in the Act that are not, specific sectors in the inventory. And while I have the floor, I'll just mention one more thing for the TAG to consider. I think I've said this before, the Act determines the credits as the difference in the life cycle emissions from the fuel that was avoided versus the fuel that was used instead. It does not attempt in any way to acknowledge any embodied emissions in any of these clean heat measures. And a really good example of that is in the weatherization category. If you're using an expanded polystyrene foam for insulating a house, you are including much higher embodied emissions than you are if you use like a dense packed cellulose. The Act doesn't acknowledge that, but I think it's something that I think the TAG should at least be aware of and decide whether or not we want to comment on whether that fuel avoided versus fuel used instead methodology achieves what we want it to achieve.
Thank you, Brian. Before I turn it to Luz, I'll say that last issue that you've raised was brought up, was mentioned to me by folks who are in the weatherization business, and they appreciated that very point. Thank you. Luz, and then TJ.
Hi, just a quick comment. I think the work groups are a great idea because it's going to be the best way to actually get some of this work done. I'm glad we've had conversations about the role of our group because I'm still a little unsure of what we're supposed to be doing. So I appreciate those conversations. I do have a concern on how do we tie in, and this can be discussed maybe with the work group, how do we tie in grid capacity to some of these initiatives? Do we know that if we go electric by 2030, that will have the capacity in the grid? And maybe that's through another study. And I'm assuming the study is available on the ANR website. Sorry, I was not aware that study was complete for life cycle calculations.
Well, it's excuse me, but it's not complete yet. It's still in draft, but we will post it when it's final.
Thanks, Luz. TJ.
Yeah, I just wanted to, for the work groups, just tie it back to a specific example since the measure characterization has come up a few times. And later on the agenda, talking about next agenda, the potential study consultants, NV5, are available to come and talk about the measure assumptions, or the assumptions and methodology to create measure characterizations and the potential study. And so those things that Ken, you were talking about market barriers or like capability, I think that is part of the potential study. There's a specific call out for workforce in particular, workforce availability to meet the targets. But and so I guess whether that happens in a work group or the full committee, this one I tend to think the full TAG here would benefit from that. But it could be a path where we get that initial feedback, and we want that feedback. I think that's the good role for the TAG, is to give feedback on the assumptions and methodologies that are going to be used for the potential study. And then if there are a couple of people that are willing to kind of engage on some key questions as they come up, so we get feedback on the overview, consultants go away and do a bunch of work implementing based on the methodology that was described. There could be some other questions that come up. That could actually be a good role for a couple of people in a work group to engage on and kind of just bring back updates to the group. And then we would imagine broader, when there's draft results, or we'll figure out the exact timing, but when there's draft results, that comes to the full TAG to actually discuss and get feedback on. And so at least on the measure characterizations, I wanted to provide kind of that arc or path, and just as an example of how that might work.
Thanks, TJ. And I'll take the chair's prerogative to insert a couple comments here. That's the way you've described it, I think, does capture much of the thinking about how we would engage, both as the group and with the help of work groups. Just one point that seems to go without saying, for your potential study, as you said, your consultant has to develop measure characterizations. Presumably, that's an area where coordination with the PUC's consultant is going to be critical for consistency's sake, obviously, and for the accuracy, if that's the right word, of the measure characterizations themselves. Anyway, that sort of dialectic will be terrific. I'll just say now, I will anticipate the conversation about the next meeting agenda. TJ had asked that we set aside time for the potential studies consultant to speak with us, and we're going to set aside a significant chunk of time, in fact, to do so. So I agree with you, TJ, that this is something that the entire group really should engage on, and we can do right away. Next, let's see. Ken, your hand is still up. I assume you would like to speak again?
Nope.
Okay, well, I should take my hand down then. Okay, does anyone else have thoughts? Well, we're sort of at. Well, I will open it up for public comment, and then let's come back to thinking about what initial steps we might want to take with respect to this agenda item. Are there folks in the public? Yes, Mr. Mr. Morales, who is sitting in for his colleague Sam Lair, who couldn't make it. Vincent, please.
That's right. Thank you very much. Yeah, we wanted to add. I wanted to add to what Ken and Brian mentioned. We have a lot of interest in participating in a discussion around emissions, life cycle emissions accounting, given that it's a major conversation in each decarbonization program between clean fuel standards and clean heat standards in other states and also in Canada. So thanks for already initiating the discussion today in this call, and happy to keep participating in that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Any other input from?
This is Thomas Weiss on the telephone.
Great, Thomas, go ahead.
Maybe you covered it and I missed it, but how do the non-ag parties proceedings learn about when these working groups might be meeting? Those, trying to follow what they're doing, or is it just pay attention every 2 weeks or whatever the schedule is going to be for the TAG meetings?
Well, certainly that, Mr. Weiss, but also they will be, as it stands now, we plan to put them on the website, the PUC website. It's a good question. There are a couple details that still need to be ironed out about how the working groups would work. We still want to figure that out, but yes, we're at the very least we'll have them identified on the website.
Thank you very much for that answer.
Thanks. Much appreciated. Okay. So where does this leave us? It seems to me that we might want to identify a couple working groups right now and seek volunteers and then start out giving thought to some of the issues that are being raised. And it seems to me certainly a work group that would address issues being raised in the workshop next week might make sense. Just my thought. I'll turn it to the group. TJ and Ken, Emily. Well, TJ hasn't raised his, but Ken, you raised your hand first, then Emily Roscoe.
Yeah, there are two particular work groups that I think, for me, are the most interesting, and that is is the market scenarios, to develop a few kind of examples of how things might work with the creation, trading, ownership of credits. I think that, for me, that's just fun. And the other is, and I think I've raised this before, and it's called the question of wood. I think the wood issue is going to require a lot of discussion, and hopefully maybe we can frame it a little bit so we don't just open the floodgates for all of the concerns that have been raised in the past in just kind of a flood fashion. If we could somehow structure that issue, and in the wood, just so you know, it has two pieces. One, statute includes advanced wood heat as a clean heat measure. So there's an expectation, at least in legislation, that the adoption of wood leads to a reduction in emissions. And I know people disagree with that. But the second piece also is the extent to which wood is a current fuel, and if it is replaced by something like a heat pump, which, for example, is my house. I put in a heat pump, and it largely has been replaced the use of one of my pellet stoves. So that isn't often a consideration when looking at heat pumps. And so anyway, those are just two examples, but there's a lot there. And anyway, those are the two topics that I would love to participate in.
Ken, forgive me. I'm writing notes and I'm not paying attention. The first one was
market scenarios.
Okay, thank you. I thought so. I just
yeah.
Okay. Emily Roscoe.
Thanks, Rick. I guess two comments. One was that in preparation for this meeting, I was focused on prioritization of these work groups. So I'm not prepared to comment on sign-ons for these work groups at this moment. And my second comment, I guess I'm just identifying that Efficiency Vermont has technical experts that I can foresee wanting to pull in to some of these work groups if I will be participating in those, and maybe just curious about if we've thought about that process, or maybe starting that conversation about if that's a possibility and what that process looks like to pull in experts from member organizations.
Well, and let me just respond. The tag process document that the PUC put together, in fact, allows for that, recognizes that, and sure. So bringing in experts from organizations is by all means on behalf of organizations, and in fact, on behalf of any of the TAG members. I noted when we had this discussion that I don't represent an organization, but I shouldn't be precluded from bringing in an expert who might be able to help. So yes, we'll be able to do that, and that should be a fairly, there should be nothing to it. I mean, conversations with those folks would be more than welcome. Luce.
Hi, I'd like to be, if possible, involved with credit values, early action credits, and the credit ownership. Just working on that with that group.
Emily Levin.
I'm interested in just taking a step back for a minute. I like Emily, I don't know that we're all prepared to actually sign on to work groups. So for this, at this point, although it's great if folks are, for today, one thing I was hoping we could explicitly discuss is, are these the right work groups? Do we need work groups for all of these topics, or are there other topics that should be included? And again, this raises the question that we've kind of been discussing and that Ken has spoken to about, like, some of these things are very squarely assigned to the tag, like being engaged in measure characterizations and life cycle emissions and retirement schedules and things like that. Other topics that are more market related have very strong relationships, and I think it may be of great value for the tag to engage on those issues so that we can better understand how these pieces interact. But I thought it would be useful to explicitly discuss that. Like, are other folks on the same page as Ken that we should be kind of taking on some of these other topics about how the actual market works and the financial values of the credits and things like that? Or do folks feel like we should be staying in our lane? And is there any, I assume there's no restriction, like if the tag is really motivated and we want to do more work, that nobody will turn that down or tell us that we are exceeding our scope, but I just wanted to check on that. And then just a small thing, maybe we can circle back to this, but while I don't know that we need to assign people to work groups today, the issue of the required amounts, number 5, is the active one in discussion with the PUC. So I do think as like an interim step, we should identify a couple of people that are interested in getting engaged in that issue and that can ideally attend the technical workshop or conference that the PUC is holding next Friday and kind of report back to the tag at our next meeting, just because that issue in particular has some time sensitivity to it if we do want to weigh in. So those are kind of 3 high-level thoughts on kind of how to organize this conversation.
And very helpful indeed. Thank you, Emily. That's very helpful. I want to open it up, of course. I want others to respond, but I'll just offer a couple of comments. One being I certainly am concerned about mission creep. We've got enough work ahead of us that we want to be careful about expanding our ambit. But I do appreciate Ken's point that these issues that he's raising will have and can have direct and indirect impacts on specific items that are squarely in our scope of work. I do encourage folks to go back to the legislation, which I do on this, just to see exactly what it says. And that's the place to go, in my view, for answers to what our scope is. I do agree with you, Emily. I think at the very least on the emission scheduling, if we can identify a few folks who want to take that on right now and be prepared to come back to us at our next meeting would be great.
Sorry, just I think actually you mean retirement schedule. This is another thing, like the word value has multiple meanings, the word schedule has multiple meanings, so it actually could be a little bit confusing.
No, I got it. No, you're right. Retirement schedule, forgive me. That's exactly what I meant. Forgive me. I think that does make sense. Those are my thoughts. Others? Brian.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I'm having well, first of all, I'll open with what the Emily said is I'm not ready to sign up all for these. And I wonder if we can collapse this list or, based on the conversation we just had, like make it clear what you actually are talking about and whether or not these need to be sequenced in some way. For example, like measure characterizations, how is that different from reconciling the life cycle emissions with inventory emissions? Because I think that's what you tried to do, right? With a measure characterization is here's a clean heat measure, here's what we're saying its life cycle emissions are, and then we're saying what its inventory emissions are. So I'm not entirely sure that those are different. And then I think that work leads to the discussion of if I understand what emissions schedule is, that comes after that. You'd say, here's the measure characterizations, and then as TJ has been saying, you need to come up with a measure, a sample, or a reference measure mix, or maybe more than one, and say, okay, if we apply these measures in these amounts on this, over this time period, here's the clean heat credits that would be generated, and here's how that relates to, or here's the emissions reductions that results in on a gross basis. So that's just an example. I think there's a lot of categories here, and I think the work needs to be sequenced, and I think they could be collapsed.
I fully agree with you, actually. Actually, Brian, not for a moment.
Thank you,
did I
Chair. Thank you.
Not for a moment that these
I
were.
don't hear that very often. Everybody agrees with me wholeheartedly.
No. I confess that this list reflects my own struggles with characterizing the issues and the tasks ahead of us. So this is exactly the kind of response I was hoping for, and prioritization is absolutely the case. That we absolutely need that. So I'm with you. Others? Floyd, please.
Yeah. So I'm sorry if this was asked and answered before. I'm still really confused as to the role of the tag with respect to the technical consultant. Or are we, through these work groups, are we looking to shape the work of the technical consultant, or are these work groups being set up to respond to what we get out of the technical consultant? I'm trying to figure out is there a feedback loop there? And I do agree with the comments from Brian and the other folks that if we do set up these work groups, there does seem to be a need for sequencing, because it doesn't really make sense to talk about characterization until you've settled on a methodology that you're going to use to characterize, and and so forth.
Absolutely, Floyd. I agree. I will say, and again, I'm just a member of the tag. I'm just one of the 15 of us or 14 of us. I think the answer to your question is both. Yes, that we can provide thoughts that will inform the consultant's work, will respond to the consultant's work, will also, and I think most importantly, ultimately, help the tag as a whole respond to and perform the tasks that we are charged with in advising the PUC as it develops the rule. So the question of a feedback loop is yes. I think that the conversations go many ways, before, after, and during the work of the consultants, and in response, of course, to the comments and filings of the parties.
So
go ahead, Floyd.
Follow up. Yeah, real quick follow up. So if that's the case, it would seem like we need to get the technical consultant looped into these discussions as quickly as possible, so that they can help us shape, hey, you're going in the wrong direction with these work groups. This is what we need your feedback on, that sort of thing. So I'll just throw that out there.
Good point. We'll be hearing from the consultant next week or in the next meeting, and at all the meetings, certainly. And I think in the next couple of weeks, it'll be offline. We'll in conjunction with the staff at the PUC and the consultant, we'll develop the means by which we're communicating regularly and openly with the consultant. Are there other thoughts? Well, let's. Have I opened it up to public comment already? I feel like I have. If I haven't, I'll do so now. Okay. Well, I'm trying to synthesize what I've heard, and I think I'll propose. Oh, go ahead, Ken.
So yeah, what I'm glad to do is, because I know it is these very short titles of work groups are kind of hard to recognize. What I'm glad to do is in the two that I mentioned, the market scenarios and the issue of wood with regards to life cycle and inventory emission, write up what I think the work group would do, and try my best to also talk about its interaction with the consultants, where it feeds into the schedule, and circulate that so that at the next meeting, people can. I think they're allowed to express. I think they're allowed to express reactions to me if we circulate it before the meeting. I think, but anyway, do that just so for those two anyway to get a stronger sense of what's possible. And then in terms of the retirement schedule, I mean, I intend to participate in the workshop next week. So I don't know what that means in terms of a work group, but maybe there will be a few of us there, and that's kind of a natural. We hear what goes on in that workshop, and it might be a natural jumping off point. Is okay, then this is where we could go with a work group. So anyway, those three I see some specific next steps for.
Thank you, Ken. Other thoughts? And TJ says he'll be at the workshop, and so will I. I would say that at least the three of us and anyone else commit to being at the workshop and being prepared to come back to the group, the entire group, with a report on the workshop and thoughts about where we need to go, what we need to do. And we can arrange, I think, for a meeting amongst those folks to discuss that in preparation for the next TAG meeting. So in effect, an ad hoc work group for the purposes of dealing with the workshop and the comments next week. Does that, go ahead, Emily.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. I have it on my calendar. I'm also going to try to listen in, but don't have a lot of time to kind of synthesize the discussion. On another, I guess, process suggestion, or I just wanted to check on the process. It sounds like Opinion Dynamics hasn't yet had their kickoff meeting, and we'll be doing that soon. We could sort of have a little ad hoc work group of people to take on a little bit deeper engagement with the technical consultant schedule, if that made sense. I don't want to, over engage the TAG in the consultant management process if that's not appropriate, but I am very eager to kind of put our schedule and the PUC schedule and the technical consultant schedule sort of side by side and figure out what makes sense and how we might recommend organizing and sequencing these tasks. So if it's appropriate to have TAG involvement in some side conversations with the PUC and Opinion Dynamics as they're getting started, I think we could potentially circle back at the next meeting with sort of a proposal for how to organize some of the work and kind of a follow-up on the whole scheduling issue, and also potentially a recommendation for how if at all it would make sense to organize subgroups related to the measure characterization and credit value and life cycle analysis of biofuels tasks, all of which have a significant nexus to the technical consultant. So that's my proposal. Again, I don't want to get too involved if it's not appropriate at this stage, but I feel like that would be extremely helpful so that we can wrap our head around when and how it will be most impactful and useful for us to get involved versus providing our input sort of out of sequence or too late, too early, et cetera.
Yep. I think that's a very good idea. And I will suggest that that's actually a question to take on as an element of agenda setting, which is to say that you and I, in conjunction with the staff at the PUC, should first address that with respect to setting the agenda. Remember, the consultant's going to talk to us next week, and we can sit down, I think, with the staff and the consultant if it works with their timing and their expectations as part of a kickoff meeting, and begin to address those questions.
Would
Ken,
that
let's.
be, I was just going to see if is the PUC comfortable with that? Like, does that seem appropriate? I don't want to make our whole plan and then find out that we're
Well,
sort of,
well, before Deirdre or Tom jumps in, and they may not want to say anything, that will be something that we can ask, that you and I will
yeah,
ask and figure it out.
okay.
I, if that's okay with you, I mean, if that makes sense to you, that's the way I would proceed.
Yep.
And it so happens that Erin, the consultant, is willing to speak on this issue to some degree. In any case, go ahead, Erin.
I'm not sure if it's, there we go. Okay. I'm not sure if it's speaking or having more questions. I just want to make sure that I have a clarity on when we're saying consultant, we're talking about us, and you're saying that we'll
Yes.
be meeting next week, because I know we have a brief initial meeting with the PUC next week.
Right.
I'm
sharing.
Just want to make sure I have clarity on what the next steps are here.
We are talking about you, and we are expressing a desire to really coordinate closely with you, but we recognize that this is the PUC's call, just how that works, and so we want to make sure we're obeying the protocols. But it seems to us that it makes sense that we really, get our ducks lined up together, and there should be an opportunity for that.
Okay.
And so we will speak in setting up the agenda for the next meeting, finalizing it. We will speak with the PUC staff on this question, because it will affect, in part, what you present to us or what we talk about with you at the next meeting, which is 3 weeks from today. Does that make sense?
Got it. Thank you. Yeah, I think you were saying next week, and so I was just wanting to clarify that we weren't indeed talking about another tag meeting next week.
No.
We'll stand by.
No, I was talking about Emily and I getting together. Emily and me getting together.
Okay, thank you.
And others.
Yeah, no, I think our intention is, of course, to engage in the way that is deemed most efficient and effective. So we'll stand by and look forward to that initial meeting with the PUC next week.
Great. What my final suggestion here, and I will ask Dominic if we need to do a motion on all of this. My final suggestion will be that Emily and I and that I, with Emily's assistance, will take some time and do what Brian has rightly suggested. Consolidate, prioritize, sequence the work that we do in the possible work groups, and make some suggestions. I will be in touch with members of the TAG to refine those thoughts and come back to you, in addition with Ken's offer as well, with stronger ideas for how to take on the work that we see before us, and put that on the agenda for next week. That would be my suggestion as how to proceed from at this point.
Yes, Rick, just to answer your question about parliamentary procedure, if you consider this part of your agenda setting responsibilities as defined by the procedures, then we do not need to take a motion of it. If you feel differently, or if any of the TAG members object to that characterization of this task, please do so, and we can work towards a motion.
I certainly like that solution. How do others feel? I see some thumbs up. I will take it that this silence is agreement, and that's a great way to proceed. Okay, this is good. Let's see. We can go on to the next item of the agenda. I have other matters.
Chair Weston.
Pardon me?
I had a comment.
Oh, please, by all means.
Yes, I just to the extent that it's appropriate and doesn't run into the public meeting laws, if you want any assistance with developing scopes for the subcommittees, feel free to ask.
Thank you very much. I certainly plan to. Thank you. Ken?
Yeah, we talked about looping back to the schedule discussion after this, and so there's two topics I'd like to raise. One is kind of a request, and I don't know how formal this needs to be, but as I say, in some of the discussions I've been holding in the last couple of weeks, there is this issue as to whether it is possible that there will be any credit obligation in the year 2025. I think if, again, I don't know if the commission can and the staff can review the statute and determine that that is impossible, or the statute does not envision there to be any credit obligation in 2025. We should know that. I think that helps with schedule stuff a little bit. And I know there are other people. If maybe it leads to an order or something, because there are other people. I talked to an obligated party about this, and they were of the belief that no obligations do not begin until 2026. So if it's possible they might exist in 2025, people should know. And if it's not possible, then I think, and maybe this leads to a very specific question that needs to be deliberated on. I don't know, but that is a topic that I think is important. So again, I don't know how to communicate that forward to the commission that this is an issue that needs to be resolved. That's one. And two is, when we spoke at our last meeting, if my memory serves, there was the issue of credit ownership. And I think we left it that the PUC was going to come up with, and I think a draft, I don't know if we get to review a draft order, but what's happened with that? Where's the credit ownership topic? So if those two questions could be addressed, that'd be great.
Let's start with the second one. I think your memory is correct. I think we did, boy, yes, we were going to hear from the PUC on that. Emily, do you remember, excuse me, Deirdre, do you remember exactly how and Dominic, your microphone's on too, if you want to speak. Go ahead.
Yes. To answer the question you asked, Deirdre, because I've got the floor, at the last TAG meeting, the group did request a proposal, a straw proposal from the commission on the ownership question for review and critique by this group. It is something that we at the commission have been working on. We've had a couple meetings over the last week or so. We are putting together a straw proposal that will go a couple places, including in front of this group. I don't want to get ahead of our deliberations. I would be comfortable saying kind of the state of play after reading the various, the two workshop or the comments, workshop, reply comments. But I think it would be premature to say exactly what might come before you. We do plan for it to come before this group.
Thank you, Dominic, and thank you, Ken, for reminding us of that. Dominic, just one question. Do you think it'll be something that we'll want to be able to discuss at our next meeting 3 weeks from now?
Yes. My personal opinion is that it will be ready by that point.
Right. Okay, so that then becomes part of the agenda setting process. Great. Okay, good. With respect to the first question, Ken, I think a motion could be made in which, and discussed and either approved or not, asking the PUC for, I think what you're asking for is, an answer to that question. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah. Specifically, is the Public Utility Commission's understanding of the statute that credit obligations will, could, or could not be established in 2025.
Excuse me. Are you making a motion? Oh, well, before you do, let me just turn it to TJ. Go ahead.
I think this is, again, part of the establishing the reduction requirements, and this could be coming up in the comments that are due next week in the workshop. So if the question is and well, I'll withhold what I think about the answer there, but I think that might be a good thing for the next meeting to kind of, after the benefit of these comments, where there's going to be a lot of process suggestions, which would have a start date, or imply one at least. Maybe I'm thinking about that wrong, but I am happy to be told so.
Any thoughts from others on Ken's question and TJ's thoughts about it? Brian.
Yeah, I don't know the answer, but what I believe is that when the legislature takes this back up again, they could change it anyway. So, there may be an answer to Ken's question based upon how the act looks now, and there might be a different answer if once the legislature revisits enacting the program.
You mean next year? Is that
Yeah.
what you're,
Yeah. We get done with this, they take it up, and then, things could change.
Yeah.
I think it's a great question. I mean, obviously it's a critical question for an obligated party, but I don't know that any answer that we would, that the PUC through their, attorneys would provide today would be, would be the final answer.
Right. Luce.
I think it also ties to cost, like I think Ken has mentioned. Everybody knows the struggle we're having right now with school budgets, and if this will impact greatly their fuel costs in 25, we don't know what that means for these schools, right? We know that we're struggling right now. So I think until we know costs, it's all intermingled on how soon are we going to start and are we going to phase it in because of the impact to some of the groups like school districts, hospitals, etc., so they can plan their budgets, because we know fuel costs will go up, and larger buildings cannot turn on a dime and put in a heat pump and solve their their emission problem. So it's just another thing to think about.
Ken, your hand is still up?
Yeah, it is. So first, to respond to that, it is very possible to design this so that if there are 2025 obligations, the credits cost zero. Because remember that we have measures installed in 23 and 24 that are worthy of credits. If you establish a credit amount in 2025 that just accommodates the 23, 24, and 25 installations, then there's no cost. And I know that's a bizarre outcome, but it still could. And there may be reasons to do that. That's one of the reasons for this market working group, is to just run through some scenarios. But that is a possibility. And in fact, you use 25 to establish credit banking, so that we're able to actually generate more credits in 25 using 23, 24, and 25 installations, so that you actually have a little bit of a bank. Anyway, that's that point. But the other thing that I want to also make sure we include is, you say that I would like, when the Public Utility Commission, I'm sure they're going to be asked to testify to the legislature on their February 15th check-in report. I want to make sure that it's not the only voice we heard was that we should delay the requirements of the legislation. So, and I think that's related to this as well. That, and again, I don't know motion wise or what, but the fact that there has to be some description of the hazards of delay, it's my position of that. So, and I know I'm not the Public Utility Commission, but the extent that I'm a member of the TAG, at least not every member of the TAG supports the idea that it's an obvious direction to delay implementation of the law.
Thank you. Brian, your hand is up.
Yeah, Lucy, you make an excellent point. My experience with programs like this, I mean, nothing we're going to do is going to be free. If you think this is a good idea, then it's worth the cost. And if you think it's a bad idea, it's never a good time. So, we're kind of in that, I think that dynamic is going to play out here.
I understand, sorry, I'm jumping in, but just having our meeting with school board this past Tuesday where our taxes are going up 26% without even considering fuel costs. I'm just saying, you're going to have a gentle buffer there and do a transition.
Thank you. Yeah. TJ?
Yeah, I just really want to appreciate the raising of cost implications, both now and earlier, Ken. I think it's really, really important and been under discussed. But I also just want to, in terms of the role of the TAG, when Ken, you're talking about, the costs of a delay, I think the role of the TAG is to objectively talk about the implications of a delay. And I just want to be clear, and because I think there could also be, I actually don't know, I haven't thought about it enough, but my guess is that there's benefits and costs. And so we would want to just, if the TAG was going to do something there, and it seems like that might be a technical advisory group role, is to say, if there is a delay, this is what that means. And that could be, there could be positives and negatives, and then those may balance out, and however they balance out. But I just don't want to assume that there's only costs of a delay.
Thanks, TJ. Any other thoughts here? Okay, where does that leave us? Do we, is there an action that we need to take, or should we let this marinate?
When will the legislature actually be considering the report? Or is do we know that?
I don't. I'm sure it's, they just got it yesterday. I don't know.
Yeah, so I think given that we don't have an immediate need, like legislature taking up check back report next week kind of thing, we probably have time to let it marinate a little. I would suggest that all the TAG members actually read the report, which many of us haven't had time to do. It is a really good summary of the overall process and work streams, so I think it is helpful just as an orientation document, even if you don't agree with the scheduling recommendations within it. And then we can hopefully, I think we've now got a number of items on our next agenda, but if we can fit it in our next meeting, maybe we can talk at that point about whether the TAG would like to make any additional statement or provide any additional input to the legislature via some sort of a statement adopted at our next meeting. Does that make sense?
Hearing or seeing no hands up, I'm going to take that as a general will of the group at this point. Ken, a hand comes up.
Sorry. And I lose track of the calendar as to when the legislature takes the week off. But I actually do think there's a possibility they'll call the PUC in before they go on break before our next meeting, and a possibility. And I don't know because this is a very important topic to them. So at the risk of being too bold, I'll just say it, and you can all challenge me and ridicule me, but I would ask that the PUC not testify before the legislature before the TAG meets.
Are you making that as a motion of the TAG?
Well, let's get people's reaction to why I'm crazy.
Ken, I appreciate your sentiment. This is Matt. I'm sorry, I'm on the road. It can't be on video, but I don't think we should be directing the PUC whether or not to testify for the lawmakers. That just seems a flex that we shouldn't use. I understand what you're saying, Ken, but that's not a position I will take.
Understood.
I'm wondering that if the legislature calls the chair into chat about this, he really can't say no. That was just my thought. Any other reactions? Well, with that, Ken, I appreciate your concerns about this. I very much, but I think it sounds like the group is inclined to let this go for now and take it up.
That's very fair. Very fair.
Yep. Okay. Well, with that, I think we've finished item 7 and perhaps item 8, but I'll just go back to item 8. Are there any other matters at this point that the TAG would like to address? Emily?
I think I just want to make sure I've ended up with a clear understanding of where we've left off on this schedule. I know that you and I will be working on this side. If there's a hard deadline for the TAG to provide input to the PUC on this schedule, it would be helpful to know that. Like what I have taken from this meeting is that we can provide our input on kind of an ongoing basis, but and it sounds like the PUC doesn't have a specific date in mind to publish a final schedule. Is that accurate? Like, I just would like to be aware of it if there's any kind of hard deadline that should be guiding our efforts on this front, because I do think the scheduling and sequencing of tasks is pretty important. So I don't want to miss our opportunity to weigh in if there's any kind of firm timeline associated with that.
Thanks. Luce?
Just to echo that, this is just a small thing, but looking at their check back report, they have one of the important workshops for adopting new clean heat measures is July 5th. And I don't know about you, but most of my staff has taken July 5th off because July 4th is a Thursday. So can we just ask them to revise that date? And it's a long ways away, but I think it's an important workshop to have on a day that hopefully people can attend.
We've got well, Dominic is coming on. I was going to say that point is great. I don't know that we need to make a motion on it, or I mean, I think the message is loud and clear. But Dominic?
Correct. All workshop dates in that draft scheduling order are approximate. They're better read as week of whenever the date is. And beyond that, we have heard the suggestion that things be combined. And given that we have moved past the original draft schedule, that is, I personally feel that will be a necessary course of action. So addressing your comment, Luce, yes, to be transparent, I also plan on taking July 5th off. So, absolutely.
I mean, I was looking at the schedule, honestly, to look at summer vacations. So that's why it came up.
Right. Gotcha. With respect to the hard deadline question, Emily, that you raised, so far we have not been given one. That the PUC is still working on the schedule. And I think that even with another scheduling order, whether draft or not draft from the PUC, there will always be an opportunity to comment on the schedule and suggest changes. But that having been said, if Dominic or Deirdre has anything to say, great. Otherwise, I would say that what we'll be doing in the next, certainly in the next 3 weeks, will be communicated to the PUC. We'll be talking to the PUC as we develop the agenda for the next meeting. I think we continue to have opportunities to say what we think about the schedule. But that's, again, just my thought. Dominic?
I want to open up for Erin. I saw she turned her mic.
Hi, Erin Hicks Tibbles. I just wanted to comment that the sooner you give us information on the sequencing that works for you and the schedule that works for you, the better we can integrate it in the schedule that we're creating. Because we do need to, we need to keep working. It's a short time period, so the sooner we get the information, the better.
Yeah, so just to follow up on that, I think at risk of totally overloading our schedule for the next meeting, I do think we need to kind of come back to our next meeting with some of us having done some behind the scenes work with the PUC. I mean, probably Rick and I can do this, but also with Opinion Dynamics, and we've also got our facilitator who's getting engaged in the process to help support this group. So if we can really try to wrangle that and kind of come back to the group with a recommendation at our next meeting for how to sequence some things, then the group could look at it and hopefully sort of make some sort of a motion or proposal back after they've reviewed it at our next meeting. I think that's the soonest we could really provide formal input from the TAG, Erin. So that's like early, what is that, March 7th or something along those lines?
That's March 7th, yes.
Understood. We would appreciate your work.
Great. I think that's right, Emily. Okay, well, we'll be busy next week and the week after. Thank you. Okay. Any other matters? Okay. There are none. The ninth item agenda is about the next agenda, and we've been talking about it throughout. I've got tons of notes here. I think we're in good shape. Is there anything anybody wants to say more about it? TJ.
Just for the potential study, I would like 45 minutes to an hour, I think, is probably for that discussion, methodology and assumptions. And I would urge that it's in the earlier part of the agenda, just so we don't run out of time, because I think that's going to be our first real substantive opportunity to provide technical feedback on something. However it works out, I'll leave it to your prerogative, but that's my request.
Early in
TJ, is there time sensitivity with that? Like, I'm just looking at how many other things we have to do, and it does feel like there's some urgency to provide a scheduling recommendation and set up our subgroups and all of that. Like, I'm a little worried about giving that study its due, given how many other topics we have at the next meeting, and we also have to review the technical. I'm just wondering is there any chance we could delay that without negatively impacting anything, or does it really need to be at the next meeting?
I think so. We are hoping to have memos for the TAG to review that describe it, in advance of that meeting, and really the contractor needs to start going. And so I feel like if we delay another 2 weeks from there, the contractor could be down a path that the TAG says, put the brakes on, and that would be really inefficient. So
okay.
March 7th really seems like the right timing for that.
Okay. Just thought I'd check. So
yeah.
we have a lot to cover at that next meeting.
Right. There's a lot that hinges on that September 1st date of the potential study being done. So it really, don't want to delay that.
Thanks, TJ. We will do our very best to accommodate that. Absolutely. Great. Great. Anything else on next week's agenda, or next meeting's agenda, rather? If not, I would like one last thing. This will be the item 10, the closing. I will open it up for further. Oh, I'm sorry. Did someone? TJ, is your hand up?
Oh, no, sorry, that's old.
Okay. I will open it up for final comment from the public, but I do have one other thing to add, and that is, should we pick a date for the meeting after the next meeting? I would. Next
We
meeting
have
is
we have it regularly scheduled every other Thursday. That was
yes.
in the
Every other Thursday now. Is that we have done that?
I think so. It's in the minutes.
Okay. Thank you. I couldn't remember if we'd done. Okay, so the next meeting will be on the 7th is a Thursday, so the next one will be the 21st. That's great. Thank you for reminding me.
Is there any chance the PUC could circulate, or maybe you've done this and I missed it, but a recurring meeting invitation for those dates?
Yeah, we haven't yet, but we will.
Okay, thank you so much.
Great. Let me open it up. Is there any further comment from members of the public?
This is Thomas Weiss.
Yeah.
On telephone.
Yep. Go ahead.
I have one request and one question. I'm a civil engineer who's worked my entire life with contracts, and I'd like to know what scopes of services are. So is it possible to put what I request that the scope of services for the various contracts, if not the entire contracts, be placed somewhere where they can be found, either on the Clean Heat Standard page. I guess that would be the best place, or the most convenient. And that's my request. And my question is a jargon term. What is NV5?
That's the name of the consultant.
And that's the name, NV5. It's not an abbreviation or acronym or anything?
That I don't know. TJ?
It's a global company that recently purchased was Optimal Energy out of Heinsberg. I guess it's Nolte Vertical is the name.
Thank you.
But that most of the work is from the folks out of maybe it's Bristol. Sorry, Optimal Energy was in Bristol, I think.
Yeah. With respect to the first, with respect to Mr. Weiss's request about the scopes of work, I'm going to leave that to the department and the PUC and whatever the legal requirements are or can be, or I mean not can be, to address.
This is Thomas Weiss again. I would think that's a public record, but maybe not.
I would think so, but there may be parts of the contracts, I'm just leaving this open, that are entitled to be redacted. That's all. But
Mr.
the scopes of work.
Quick clarifying questions. Are you looking for the scope of work that was part of the RFP or the executed contract?
If you're asking me again, I'm actually looking for the scope of work in the signed contract. What was actually agreed on? What is the contractor required to do? So I found it's important to know that when trying to evaluate a consultant's work.
Absolutely. So the scope of work as included in the RFP is currently posted on the Clean Heat Standard website. It is under the actually newly renamed drop-down menu, legislative reports, press releases, and announcements. You can find the scope of work in the RFP there. And unless Deirdre has more clear of an answer right now, we will look into the contracts.
Thanks, Dominic.
And just for the department's role, we are developing our own clean heat standard landing page as well that will cross-reference the PUC's page, but that should be out either today or early next week, and that will include the scope of work.
Great. Thank you. Well, unless there's anything else, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
That was Brian. Second?
Second.
That's TJ. Any discussion? All in favor? We are adjourned, and thank you very much. And Emily and I will be in touch with you. And thank you all for your great work. We really appreciate it. Thank you. And anyone, feel free to call me anytime if you've got questions or anything else that you feel.